The sun had begun its slow descent behind the distant hills, casting a warm, golden glow across the small town of Santa Rosa. The dusty streets were quiet, except for the occasional clatter of wagon wheels and the soft murmur of townsfolk finishing their daily chores. At the edge of the town, tucked away near a line of tall, weathered oaks, stood a modest blacksmith shop. Inside, the rhythmic sound of hammer striking steel echoed like a heartbeat through the wooden structure. Sparks flew as Daniel, a man in his mid-30s, worked tirelessly at the forge. His hands were strong and calloused, shaped by years of shaping iron and steel into tools, horseshoes, and weapons for the townspeople. Each swing of his hammer was precise, almost graceful, though his face bore the lines of fatigue and quiet determination. Daniel had always found a strange comfort in the forge. The heat of the fire, the resistance of the metal, and the rhythm of work gave his life a sense of purpose. The work was hard, but it was honest. He had lived in Santa Rosa for most of his life, a town that thrived on routine and simplicity, where everyone knew each other's business. And though life was often harsh, it was predictable. Until that evening, nothing unusual had disrupted the steady flow of his days. A sudden noise outside the shop made Daniel pause. It was subtle at first, a soft rustle of dry leaves, and a careful shuffle of feet on the hard-packed earth. Curious, he set his hammer down and wiped the sweat from his brow. He stepped outside, squinting into the fading light. There, standing in the shadows near the edge of the oaks, was a woman unlike anyone he had ever seen. She was tall and lithe, with dark hair that fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and eyes that shone with a fierce intelligence. Her clothing was worn but practical, made to survive the rough terrain she had undoubtedly traveled. There was a strength in her stance, a readiness that suggested she had faced dangers Daniel could only imagine. The woman stepped closer, her gaze fixed on Daniel with a mixture of caution and determination. "Evening," she said, her voice calm, but carrying an edge that made him take notice. "I need your help." Daniel, unsure whether to be wary or curious, raised an eyebrow. "My help?" he asked, his tone cautious. "You're a long way from town. Who are you?" She hesitated, then took a step closer, revealing a glimpse of the weapons she carried. Knives and a small, sturdy rifle were slung across her back and belt, each carefully secured. "My name is Aylin," she said finally. "I'm traveling through. I need steel. I need tools to repair my weapons. I've heard you're skilled with metal." Daniel studied her for a moment. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of fire and fear, that suggested she was not an ordinary traveler. She was careful in her movements, alert to every sound, every shadow. Yet, there was also a vulnerability hidden beneath her strength, a sense that she carried the weight of a heavy past. "Steel, eh?" Daniel said slowly, scratching his chin. "And why should I help you, Miss Aylin?" she supplied, her gaze steady. "You have a reputation in Santa Rosa. People say you can turn raw metal into anything a man or a woman needs. I don't have anyone else to ask." There was an honesty in her words that Daniel couldn't ignore. He had spent his life working with metals, shaping them, refining them. But he had never worked with someone like her. The idea of helping someone with her skill and determination sparked something in him, a mixture of curiosity, respect, and a quiet sense of duty. "All right," he said finally, stepping aside. "Come in. But you should know, this isn't a place for idlers or gossipers. If you want my help, you'll have to work with me. Steel is unforgiving, and mistakes can cost more than time." Aylin nodded, her expression unflinching. "I understand." As she entered the forge, the warm glow from the fire illuminated the lines on her face. Though she was young, there was a maturity in her eyes, a knowledge of hardship and survival. Daniel noticed a faint scar along her jawline, barely visible in the firelight, hinting at past battles or close encounters with danger. He didn't ask about it. Some stories, he knew, were meant to be revealed in time. The first hours were silent, filled only with the sounds of hammer striking metal and the hiss of the forge. Daniel showed Aylin how he prepared the steel, how he measured, heated, and shaped it. She watched intently, absorbing every motion, every nuance. When it was her turn, she handled the tools with surprising skill, guiding the steel with confidence and precision. Daniel's eyebrows lifted in quiet admiration. "You've had experience," he said finally, breaking the silence. "Not many people can handle steel like that on the first try." Save 10. Aylin's lips curved into a small, almost shy smile. "I learned. Life doesn't leave much time for mistakes." Daniel nodded, understanding more than she realized. He had spent years honing his craft, and now he saw someone who shared the same respect for discipline and skill. In that moment, the forge felt different, not just a place of work, but a meeting point of two lives, shaped by determination, resilience, and a quiet defiance of the world around them. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint sounds of the town settling into evening. Lights flickered in windows, and the occasional bark of a dog reminded them that life went on beyond the forge. Yet, inside, the world seemed to shrink to the glow of the fire and the dance of sparks. Each strike of hammer on metal echoed like a heartbeat, marking the beginning of a story neither Daniel nor Aylin fully understood yet. As the evening stretched on, Daniel noticed Aylin glancing toward the door more than once, her eyes scanning the shadows. "You're being careful," he said, raising an eyebrow. "I take it you're not just passing through?" Aylin's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "I have people after me," she admitted quietly. "Those who don't want me to survive. I need these weapons fixed. And maybe, I need someone I can trust." Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. Trust was not something easily given in Santa Rosa, especially with outsiders, and especially with someone carrying secrets and dangers. But there was something about Aylin, her strength, her determination, her refusal to be intimidated that drew him in. "I don't know what you've done, or what you're running from," he said carefully. "But if you're going to stay here, you'll follow my rules. You'll work, you'll learn, and you'll respect the forge. That's all I ask." Aylin nodded, her expression firm. "I can do that." By the time the sun had fully set, the forge glowed with warmth, light, and the promise of something new. Two lives, previously separate and shaped by different struggles, had intersected in the glow of molten metal and flying sparks. Daniel knew little about Aylin's past, and she knew little about his. But there was an unspoken understanding forming between them, a bond forged not just by steel, but by respect, skill, and the quiet acknowledgement of each other's strength. That night, as the town of Santa Rosa slept under a blanket of stars, the forge remained alive with the sound of work. Sparks danced like fireflies in the dim light, and the air smelled of iron, sweat, and determination. Outside, shadows shifted and moved, and somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of hooves on a dirt road hinted at dangers yet to come. But inside, Daniel and Aylin worked side by side, their lives beginning a journey neither could have predicted, shaped by fire, steel, and an unspoken trust that would grow with each passing day. The evening ended with a sense of cautious hope. Aylin had found a temporary refuge, and Daniel had found someone who challenged and inspired him. Both were aware that this was only the beginning, that the road ahead would be dangerous, unpredictable, and full of challenges. But for now, in the glow of the forge, there was a moment of peace, a fragile yet powerful connection, and the spark of a story waiting to be forged. The days that followed brought a rhythm that was both comforting and unusual. Daniel's forge, once a place of solitude and quiet work, now echoed with the presence of Aylin. She arrived each morning just as the first rays of sunlight cut through the dusty streets of Santa Rosa, carrying her own set of tools and an air of purpose. The townspeople watched from a distance, some curious, others wary, murmuring among themselves about the mysterious woman who had taken up residence in the blacksmith shop. Daniel paid little attention to their gossip. He was too focused on the work, and gradually, too intrigued by Aylin. From the start, it was clear that Aylin was no ordinary apprentice. Her hands were quick and steady, shaped by experiences Daniel could only imagine. She could bend, cut, and shape steel almost as naturally as breathing, yet she paid attention to every instruction he offered. Daniel found himself impressed by her skill, but also cautious. There was an intensity about her, a way of watching the world with sharp eyes that suggested she had faced dangers most people in Santa Rosa could not even imagine. "You don't just handle steel," Daniel remarked one afternoon, wiping his hands on a rag. Sparks flew from the forge as he adjusted a piece of red-hot iron on the anvil. "You respect it. That's rare. Most people just see metal and think it's a tool. You see it as something alive." Aylin nodded without looking up, her eyes focused on the piece she was shaping. "Steel is honest," she said quietly. "It doesn't lie. It doesn't pretend. It does what you make it do or it breaks. You can't trick it. You can't cheat it." Daniel felt a sudden respect for her words. She was right. Metal was honest, and so were those who truly understood it. He realized that in Aylin, he had found someone who shared his perspective, someone who understood the quiet discipline of patience and precision. There was a connection forming, built not on words, but on shared work, shared respect, and a mutual understanding that each swing of the hammer carried weight beyond the metal itself. Days turned into a week, and slowly, trust began to build between them. Aylin told small pieces of her story, careful not to reveal too much. She spoke of traveling through rough lands, of moving quietly to avoid being caught, of surviving by skill and wit. Daniel listened, occasionally asking questions, but mostly letting her words fill the quiet spaces between hammer strikes and the hiss of the forge. "I've been running for a long time," Aylin admitted one evening, her voice low. "Not just from people who want to harm me, but from a world that doesn't understand someone like me. I learned to trust only what I can see, what I can hold, what I can control. And steel. Steel is one thing I can always count on." Quote. Daniel nodded slowly. He understood more than she realized. He had lived most of his life within the boundaries of Santa Rosa. Yet even in this small town, life demanded caution, patience, and a careful respect for forces beyond control. Aylin's words resonated with him, stirring an unexpected sympathy and admiration. Here was a woman forged by hardship, not unlike the steel in his hands, shaped by pressure, fire, and persistence. As the days passed, Aylin began to teach Daniel some of the techniques she had learned in her travels. He watched as she demonstrated methods for strengthening steel, shaping it in ways he had never considered, making weapons sharper, lighter, and more resilient. The blacksmith was fascinated. Despite years of experience, he realized he had much to learn, and he found himself appreciating Aylin not just as a student or apprentice, but as a teacher and a partner in craft. "You see," she said one afternoon, showing him a thin blade she had just finished. "Metal remembers. If you handle it wrong, it remembers. But if you respect it, it will serve you better than any sword you buy in a store." Daniel ran his hand over the cool steel, feeling the balance, the precision, the care that had gone into it. "I see what you mean," he said quietly. "It's alive in a way. It reacts to respect and care." The bond between them grew stronger, shaped by their shared work and mutual respect. Yet beneath the routine, a tension lingered. Aylin remained alert, constantly aware of the world outside the forge. Daniel noticed how her eyes scanned the streets whenever someone passed by, how her posture was ready to react at a moment's notice. There was a constant awareness in her, a reminder that danger could strike at any time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel asked cautiously, "You've been here several days now. When does this running end?" Aylin paused, her gaze fixed on the glowing steel in the forge. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "I can't stop running until I'm sure it's safe. Until then, I survive. I move. I fight. I trust only the few who prove they deserve it." Daniel felt the weight of her words. It was one thing to forge steel. It was another to forge trust. And here was a woman who had been forced to do both to survive. He realized that helping her wasn't just about sharing tools or techniques, it was about offering a place of safety, a rare and fragile thing in her life. And despite the potential risks, he felt a growing sense of responsibility for her well-being. Life in the forge settled into a new rhythm. Days were spent shaping steel, evenings in quiet conversation, and nights filled with the sounds of the wind rustling through the trees. The townspeople began to take notice of Aylin's presence in a different way. Some admired her skill. Others respected her courage, while a few whispered warnings about the dangers she might bring. But Daniel paid little heed to the gossip. He had come to understand that Aylin's strength was something to be valued, not feared. One afternoon, as Daniel hammered a piece of iron into shape, Aylin approached with a bundle of smaller tools she had repaired herself. "You've taught me a lot," she said, handing him the bundle. "But I've taught you a few things too, haven't I?" Daniel examined the tools, noting the careful craftsmanship and subtle improvements. He nodded, a small smile forming. "Yes, you have," he admitted. "More than I expected. You have a way of seeing steel that's different, better." Aylin smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the glow of the forge. "Steel doesn't lie," she repeated. "It will show you what works and what doesn't. You just have to listen." That evening, Daniel found himself thinking about Aylin long after the forge had cooled. He reflected on her courage, her intelligence, and the quiet intensity that set her apart from anyone he had ever known. He realized that the work they had done together was more than just shaping metal. It was shaping a bond, a trust that neither of them could yet fully understand, but both felt deeply. Outside, the town settled into night. Lanterns flickered in windows, and the distant sound of a train whistle echoed faintly in the darkness. Somewhere beyond the hills, danger still lurked the people hunting Aylin, the world that didn't understand her. But inside the forge, there was a fragile sense of peace, a momentary pause in the long struggle that defined both of their lives. Aylin sat quietly by the fire, watching Daniel polish a newly shaped blade. "I didn't think I would find a place like this," she said softly. "A place where I can breathe, even for a little while." Daniel glanced at her, meeting her gaze. "You're welcome here," he said simply. "But remember, this peace is fragile. The world outside won't wait for us. We prepare, we work, and we stay ready. That's the only way we survive." She nodded, understanding the unspoken weight in his words. The trust between them was growing, tempered by caution and shaped by necessity. They were two people forged in very different fires, now learning to rely on each other, learning to combine strength, skill, and intelligence against the challenges that awaited them. As night deepened, the forge glowed faintly in the darkness, a beacon of warmth, safety, and quiet determination. Daniel and Aylin, bound by shared work and a growing respect, sat together in companionable silence, both aware that the journey ahead would be difficult, unpredictable, and full of trials. Yet, in this moment, there was a fragile hope, a sense that, together, they could face whatever came their way. The fire crackled softly, sending sparks dancing into the air, as if marking the beginning of something larger than either of them could yet imagine. Two lives, shaped by hardship, courage, and resilience, were beginning to intertwine. And though the world outside remained uncertain, inside the forge, they had found a rare and precious connection, one built not only on skill with steel, but on respect, trust, and the quiet understanding that they were no longer facing life alone. The days after Aylin had settled into the forge passed in a mixture of routine and quiet unease. The rhythm of hammer striking steel, the hiss of molten metal, and the glow of the fire had become familiar, almost comforting. But both Daniel and Aylin knew that peace in Santa Rosa was fragile. The town was small, and word traveled fast. Rumors spread quickly. And there were always those who would see Aylin as a threat, rather than a skilled woman seeking refuge. Daniel noticed it first in the way the townsfolk glanced at them from doorways, or whispered in clusters when they thought no one was listening. Children would stare too long, and shopkeepers would pause mid-task to watch the forge. The blacksmith felt the tension mounting, though he refused to let it show. He had grown used to the careful balance of caution and resilience in his own life. But protecting Aylin added a new weight to his shoulders. Aylin, for her part, remained alert. Her movements were precise, and her eyes often flicked toward the street whenever a shadow passed. She had learned long ago to read the world around her, to detect danger before it arrived. Yet, she did not let her vigilance interfere with her work. She continued shaping steel with the same skill and determination, each piece a testament to her talent and focus. But Daniel could see the strain in her posture, the tightness in her jaw when she thought no one was looking. One afternoon, as the sun beat down through the windows of the forge, Daniel broke the silence. "I've been thinking," he said, placing a red-hot blade carefully into the water trough to cool. Steam hissed and smoke rose in spirals. "We can't just sit here. People are noticing you, and not everyone in town will be kind. We need to be prepared." Aylin paused mid-step, a hammer in her hand. She wiped sweat from her brow and turned to him, her expression calm but serious. "I know," she said quietly. "I've been preparing for this. They'll come eventually. I've faced worse than a few suspicious townsfolk." Daniel looked at her, impressed by her courage, but also concerned. "It's not just townsfolk," he said. "I've heard rumors. Hunters, bounty hunters, men who won't stop until they find you. They're getting closer. We can't ignore it." Aylin's eyes narrowed, and a shadow of tension crossed her face. "I've known this would come," she admitted. "That's why I've been learning from you. These weapons, this forge, it's not just for tools, it's for survival." They spent the afternoon reinforcing the forge, creating ways to protect themselves in case danger arrived. Daniel made modifications to the doors and windows, while Aylin worked on sharpening blades and making small, practical tools for defense. The work was methodical, precise, and strangely comforting. It allowed them to focus on action rather than fear. Yet the unspoken tension between them remained. In the evenings, they spoke more openly. Aylin shared fragments of her past, stories of life in the wilderness, of battles fought and narrowly survived, of families lost to conflict. Daniel, in turn, shared pieces of his own life. The hardships of maintaining the forge alone, the loneliness of a town where everyone knew everyone else. But true understanding was rare. The conversations were cautious, respectful, and full of a quiet understanding that trust had to be earned, not demanded. "You've faced a lot," Daniel said one evening, polishing a newly crafted blade. Sparks flew as his rag brushed against the steel. "It's hard to imagine someone carrying all of that and still being you." Aylin looked at him, her eyes reflecting the glow of the forge. "Strength isn't about never being afraid," she said softly. "It's about moving forward even when fear is there. You survive, or you don't. I've learned to survive." Daniel nodded slowly. He understood her words on a deeper level than he could have expressed. Survival, resilience, courage, these were not abstract ideas for Aylin. They were daily necessities, forged by fire, loss, and experience. And as he watched her work, he realized that he had come to respect her not just for her skill with steel, but for the way she carried herself in a world that demanded strength at every turn. As the week went on, the presence of danger became more tangible. One afternoon, a group of strangers appeared at the edge of town. Daniel noticed them first. A rough-looking group, dusty and worn, moving with purpose. Their eyes scanned the streets, their hands resting casually on the weapons at their sides. Something about their demeanor set Daniel on edge. "They're looking for someone," he murmured to Aylin, his voice low. "I think it's you." Aylin's expression hardened. She moved closer to the forge, examining the tools and weapons she had prepared. "I thought they would come sooner or later," she said calmly. "We're ready." Daniel felt a mixture of admiration and anxiety. Ready or not, confrontation was inevitable. He glanced at the weapons, laid out blades, knives, reinforced tools, all crafted or improved under Aelin's guidance. They were not just tools. They were statements of preparation, of intelligence, and of survival instinct. That evening, Daniel and Aelin sat in the forge, the air thick with anticipation. They spoke less than usual, each lost in thought, each aware that the next encounter could determine the course of their lives. The townsfolk had begun to notice the tension, their whispers growing louder. And Daniel knew that they would need to face the danger head-on, sooner rather than later. Aelin broke the silence finally. "You have to understand," she said quietly. "I've survived alone for a long time. I know how to fight, how to hide, how to move. But having someone I trust, it changes things. It makes me stronger. And maybe it makes you stronger too." Daniel considered her words carefully. He had been a solitary man, comfortable in routine and solitude. Yet, in the presence of Aelin, he felt a sense of purpose he had never known. Protecting her, learning from her, preparing with her, it gave his life new meaning. But it also brought fear. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of what might happen if they weren't ready. The night fell, heavy and quiet, with only the sound of the forge's fading heat and the occasional hoot of an owl breaking the silence. Daniel and Aelin moved carefully, checking their preparations, sharpening blades, and setting small traps around the forge. Every sound outside, the creak of a sign swinging in the wind, the distant bark of a dog, the crunch of footsteps, made their hearts beat faster. By midnight, they had done all they could. The forge was ready, their weapons prepared, and their minds alert. They sat together, leaning against the warm glow of the fire, knowing that the confrontation was coming. Neither spoke of what they feared most, yet both understood the unspoken truth. Survival depended on courage, preparation, and trust in each other. As the night deepened, Daniel thought about the days ahead. He knew that protecting Aelin would not be easy, that the danger approaching was relentless and unforgiving. But he also knew something else, a truth that gave him strength despite fear. With Aelin by his side, with her skill, determination, and courage, he felt that they could face whatever came. Together, they were stronger than alone. Forged like the steel they shaped each day in the glow of the forge. Aelin, for her part, felt a rare sense of comfort. For the first time in a long while, she was not entirely alone. She had someone she could rely on. Someone who understood the value of skill, strength, and caution. It was not safety, not yet, but it was a beginning, a fragile and precious start. The night passed slowly, each sound outside a reminder of the approaching danger. Yet within the forge, there was a quiet determination, a sense of readiness, and an unspoken trust that neither Daniel nor Aelin had given lightly. They were two people shaped by different fires, learning to stand together against the world beyond the forge. When dawn finally broke, painting the town in soft, golden light, Daniel and Aelin were ready. Their weapons were sharpened, the forge reinforced, and their minds focused. The danger lurking beyond the town's edge had not gone away, but they would meet it head-on. Together, they would face the hunters, the whispers, and the unknown, prepared to fight, survive, and protect what they had built. Not just the forge, but the trust and respect they had found in each other. And so, as the first rays of sunlight touched the rooftops of Santa Rosa, Daniel and Aelin stood side by side in the forge, ready to face whatever came next. Their bond had grown stronger, tempered by skill, courage, and preparation. And though the road ahead would be dangerous and uncertain, they would face it together, each knowing that survival was not just about steel and weapons. It was about trust, strength, and the courage to stand together against the world. The morning air in Santa Rosa was crisp and clear, carrying with it the faint scent of dust and sun-warmed earth. Inside the forge, Daniel and Aelin moved with quiet determination. Every tool was in its place, every weapon sharpened, and every corner of the building prepared for what they both knew was inevitable. Outside, the town seemed peaceful, almost serene, but both of them knew better. Danger was coming, and it would not wait. Daniel checked the reinforced doors once more, tapping the wood with his knuckles and listening for any weaknesses. Aylin moved beside him, adjusting a small pile of knives and blades on the workbench. She was calm, but her eyes scanned the windows, the streets, and the distant hills with a practiced vigilance. She had faced danger before, but this time, it was different. This time, someone was targeting not just her survival, but the fragile trust and safety she had found in Santa Rosa. "They'll come from the west," Aylin said quietly, her voice steady but sharp. "The tracks I saw yesterday. They're careful, but they move fast. If they're as skilled as I think, we won't have much warning." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "We've done all we can here. The forge is ready. The weapons are ready. And we're ready. We just have to hold our ground." Hours passed in tense anticipation. The townsfolk went about their routines, some shooting curious glances at the forge, others whispering to neighbors about the mysterious woman and the blacksmith who had taken her in. Daniel ignored them. His focus was on Aylin and the forge. Aylin, in turn, remained alert but composed, a quiet calm masking the energy that would soon be needed. By late afternoon, a distant rumble reached their ears. At first, it was subtle, the soft crunch of boots on dirt, the faint clink of metal. But as the sound grew louder, Daniel and Aylin knew without a doubt that the hunters had arrived. From the edge of the hills, a small posse emerged, moving cautiously yet with purpose. Their eyes scanned the town, and the hand on each weapon signaled intent. They were here for Aylin. Aylin took a deep breath and turned to Daniel. "It's time," she said simply. There was no fear in her voice, only resolve. "We fight smart, not reckless. We protect ourselves and the forge." Daniel nodded, feeling a mix of fear and adrenaline. He had faced challenges before, but this was different. The stakes were higher, and failure was not an option. He picked up a reinforced hammer, feeling its weight in his hands, while Aylin positioned herself near the door, a small blade in hand and eyes sharp as a hawk. The first hunter reached the outskirts of the town square, his eyes catching the glint of the forge through the windows. Aylin waited until he was close enough, then moved silently, positioning herself where she could strike quickly if necessary. Daniel stayed behind the counter of the forge, ready to use his strength and knowledge of the building to their advantage. The confrontation began with a cautious approach. The hunters advanced slowly, unaware of the traps and preparations that had been made. Aylin moved with precision, her movements deliberate, striking first when a hunter attempted to peek through a window. The noise startled the others, giving Daniel time to act. He swung his hammer, using both force and technique, disarming one of the hunters and sending him stumbling back. The clash of metal rang out across the forge, echoing through the town like a signal of defiance. Aylin and Daniel moved in sync, a team forged not just by necessity, but by the days they had spent learning from and trusting each other. Every strike, every block, every careful maneuver was a testament to their preparation and courage. The hunters, though skilled, were not prepared for the combined intelligence and agility of Daniel and Aylin. Aylin anticipated their movements, predicting their approach with sharp intuition, while Daniel used the environment to his advantage, maneuvering the heavy tools and the structure of the forge to keep them at bay. Sparks flew not just from the metal but from the energy and focus of the fight itself. One hunter lunged through the doorway, but Aylin was ready. With a swift motion, she deflected his attack, using his momentum against him and sending him crashing into a stack of firewood. Daniel followed, using a carefully aimed swing of his hammer to block another attacker. The forge, once a place of calm work, had become a battleground. Every corner and tool a weapon in their defense. Outside, the townsfolk had gathered, peeking from behind doors and fences. Some gasped, others whispered in awe. They had heard tales of Aylin. But seeing her in action alongside Daniel, moving with courage, precision, and skill, was something entirely different. It was a demonstration not just of survival, but of strategy, trust, and determination. Despite the intensity of the confrontation, Daniel and Aylin remained composed. They did not panic, they did not hesitate, and they did not underestimate their opponents. Every movement was calculated, every strike measured. It was not just a fight, it was a test of will, skill, and unity. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the battle reached its peak. The hunters had realized they were outmatched by the combination of preparation, intelligence, and skill. One by one, they faltered, retreating toward the hills with cautious steps. Aylin and Daniel pursued none, understanding that victory was not in revenge but in survival. They had defended themselves, preserved the forge, and sent a clear message. They were not to be underestimated. When the last hunter had disappeared from sight, the forge fell silent once more. The air was thick with dust and the smell of heated metal, and both Daniel and Aylin were breathing heavily, their bodies exhausted but their spirits triumphant. They looked at each other, the unspoken understanding between them stronger than ever. They had faced danger together, and they had prevailed. Daniel lowered his hammer and let out a long breath. "I didn't think we'd make it without getting hurt," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "But we did. Together." Aylin smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting both fatigue and pride. "We prepared," she said simply. "That made the difference. Skill is important, but so is thinking ahead." The townsfolk, who had been watching from a distance, began to emerge, some offering quiet congratulations, others still in awe of what they had witnessed. Daniel and Aylin exchanged a glance, neither speaking at first. Words were unnecessary. The bond forged through danger and trust was stronger than any speech could express. As evening settled over Santa Rosa, the forge glowed once more, not just with the heat of the fire but with the quiet satisfaction of survival. The danger had passed, at least for now, and they had proven something important not just to the hunters, but to themselves. They were capable, they were strong, and they were ready to face whatever came next. Aylin moved to the window, looking out over the town. "They won't give up forever," she said softly. "There will be others, people who don't understand. But we're ready. We'll be ready." Daniel joined her, placing a hand on the windowsill. "I believe that," he said. "And I believe in you. We've done more than survive today. We've shown that we can protect what matters. Together." The night descended slowly, bringing with it a calm that felt both earned and fragile. Inside the forge, they worked quietly, repairing minor damage from the confrontation, sharpening tools, and checking weapons. Every action was deliberate, a continuation of the preparation that had saved them. They spoke little, but the silence was comfortable, a shared understanding that words could not fully capture. By the time the stars appeared in the sky, the forge was quiet, safe, and ready once more. Daniel and Aylin sat side by side, tired but alert, knowing that this victory was a temporary reprieve. The world beyond Santa Rosa remained unpredictable, and challenges would come again. But for now, they had each other, skill, preparation, and a growing trust that could not be broken by threat or fear. The fire crackled softly, sending sparks dancing into the air, mirroring the unspoken energy between them. They had faced confrontation, and they had prevailed. They had fought together, defended what mattered, and solidified a bond built not just on skill or survival, but on trust, respect, and courage. And as the night deepened, Daniel realized something important. It was not just the forge or the weapons that had saved them, it was the connection they had formed, the unspoken understanding, and the quiet willingness to stand together against the unknown. In that moment, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The morning sun rose slowly over Santa Rosa, painting the town in soft shades of gold and orange. The streets were quiet, and the forge, which had been a battlefield just days before, now stood calm and steady. Daniel and Aylin moved among their tools and weapons with a sense of purpose, their actions deliberate, but relaxed. The danger of the previous confrontation had passed, at least for now. but both knew that life would never be entirely safe. Yet, there was a new feeling in the air, a fragile but undeniable sense of accomplishment, trust, and partnership. Daniel looked around the forge, taking in the repaired workbenches, the sharpened tools, and the gleaming blades. Everything was in order, prepared for whatever might come next. But more than the physical readiness, he felt a sense of emotional calm that had been absent before Aylin arrived. He had grown accustomed to solitude, to the quiet predictability of the forge, and yet, over the past days, he had discovered the value of companionship, courage, and trust. Aylin moved beside him, arranging the weapons they had used in the confrontation. Her movements were precise, almost ceremonial, as if each blade carried its own story. She paused, looking out the window toward the distant hills where the hunters had disappeared. "They'll return one day," she said softly, her voice calm but firm. "People who don't understand, who don't see things the way we do. They never stop. But that's not what matters right now." Daniel turned to her, curiosity and admiration in his eyes. "What matters then?" he asked. Aylin smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and resolve in her expression. "Right now," she said, "we've survived. We've protected what we've built, and we've learned that we can rely on each other. That matters more than any threat outside these walls." Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He realized that she was right. The forge, once a place of routine labor, had become a symbol of resilience, courage, and partnership. It was no longer just a workplace. It was a sanctuary, a place where two people had learned to trust, fight, and survive together. Over the next few days, they settled into a new routine, one that balanced preparation with cautious peace. Daniel taught Aylin more about the craft of the blacksmith, sharing techniques he had learned over years of experience. She absorbed the lessons quickly, her skill and intelligence allowing her to understand concepts and methods that might have taken others months to master. In turn, Aylin continued to teach Daniel, sharing the unique techniques she had learned in her travels, from ways to temper steel for strength to strategies for using small tools more effectively. As they worked together, their bond deepened. It was not a bond built on words alone, but on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the understanding that each could rely on the other in moments of crisis. Daniel found himself noticing the small details: Aylin's careful movements, the way her eyes missed nothing, the quiet determination in her posture. He admired her not just for her skill but for her resilience, her courage, and her ability to face fear without faltering. Aylin, too, felt a growing respect for Daniel. She saw in him a man of quiet strength, someone who had lived a life of discipline, patience, and hard work. He had not only accepted her presence but had become a partner, a person she could trust when the world outside was uncertain. For someone who had spent so long relying only on herself, this was a rare and precious gift. One afternoon, as the sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows across the forge, Aylin turned to Daniel with a serious expression. "I need to ask you something," she said. "We've survived together, fought together, and learned from each other. But now, I need to know if you'll stand with me, not just here, in this forge, but beyond it. If danger comes again, will you face it with me?" Daniel paused, letting the question sink in. He looked at the tools, the weapons, the forge itself, and then at Aylin. He thought about the days they had spent working, preparing, and surviving side by side. He thought about the respect, trust, and unspoken bond that had grown between them. And he realized that he could not imagine facing the world without her, by his side. "I will," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll stand with you, no matter what comes." Aylin's eyes softened, and for the first time, a faint smile broke through the intensity that had always marked her face. "Good," she said quietly. "Because whatever comes next, we face it as partners, together." In the following days, they worked to strengthen the forge further, repairing damage from the recent confrontation and preparing for any future threats. But beyond the practical work, there was a shift in their relationship. They moved with an unspoken understanding, anticipating each other's actions and supporting one another in ways that words could not fully capture. The forge became not just a place of work but a place of connection, a sanctuary built from skill, courage, and trust. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow through the windows, Aylin and Daniel paused to rest. They sat side by side on a wooden bench, their hands resting lightly on the tools they had used all day. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with a sense of accomplishment and shared understanding. "You've changed this place," Aylin said softly, her eyes scanning the forge. "It's no longer just a forge, it's ours, a place of strength, safety, and trust." Daniel nodded, a small smile forming. "And you've changed me," he admitted. "I never realized how much one person could bring into a life that seemed so ordinary. You've made me see things differently. Aylin, you've taught me courage, patience, and trust in ways I never thought I'd learn." Aylin turned to him, meeting his gaze. "And you've taught me something too," she said, "that even in a world that's harsh and unforgiving, it's possible to find someone you can rely on. Someone who stands with you, not just in battle, but in life." They sat together, the warmth of the forge surrounding them, the quiet crackle of the fire, filling the space with a gentle rhythm. The danger that had once threatened to overwhelm them seemed distant now, replaced by a sense of hope and determination. They knew the world outside Santa Rosa would never be entirely safe, but they also knew that together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As night fell and stars began to twinkle in the sky, Aylin stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the town below. "We've done well," she said quietly. "We've survived, we've protected each other, and we've proven that we are stronger together. That's something no one can take away." Daniel joined her, placing a hand gently on the windowsill. "And whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together. We've learned that our strength is in trust, courage, and partnership. We don't have to face the world alone anymore." The night settled over Santa Rosa with a sense of calm and quiet triumph. The forge glowed softly, a symbol of resilience, skill, and shared courage. Daniel and Aylin, having faced danger, learned from each other, and forged a bond of trust, now looked toward the future with determination and hope. They had survived the challenges, defended what mattered, and discovered the strength that comes from facing life together. In the days that followed, they continued to work in the forge, preparing for the future, strengthening their skills, and deepening their connection. The town of Santa Rosa came to respect them, not just for their skill with steel, but for their courage, intelligence, and the quiet strength of their partnership. They had become an example of resilience and trust, showing that even in a harsh and unpredictable world, strength could be found in unity and determination. Aylin and Daniel often reflected on the journey they had shared, from the first moment she appeared at the forge, to the days of careful preparation, and through the confrontation with the hunters. They had grown together in ways neither could have imagined. They had learned that survival was not just about skill or courage, but about trust, respect, and the willingness to stand together in the face of adversity. And so, as the sun rose each day over Santa Rosa, the forge remained a place of warmth, light, and resilience. Daniel and Aylin continued their work, not just shaping steel, but shaping their lives together. They had faced danger, survived challenges, and discovered the power of partnership. The future was uncertain, but they were ready to face whatever came next, side by side, with courage, skill, and trust. In that quiet forge, amidst the glow of fire and the sound of hammer against metal, a story had been written not just of survival, but of connection, respect, and the enduring strength of two people who had chosen to face the world together. And as they looked toward the horizon, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it as partners, ready for the next chapter of their lives.